Okay, good to go.
Perfect, thank you. So I think we're waiting on Bob Gale and Bob Turner should both be joining.
I'm not.
Hi, Bob.
Oh, hi. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not.
Well, you're not. I can hear you.
Okay. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Doing good. Hi, Avni. You're muted.
Yes, Avni is muted.
Okay.
There you are.
I think we have a quorum now. Joel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do, yes.
Good. Okay.
I'm here, but for some reason Zoom won't let me like have a video option. So
I
I have the
Same
same
here.
issue. Yeah.
Same here.
I don't either. This is Joel.
Catalina,
I can see you, but I can't see anyone else.
Yes, I'll fix that.
yeah, thanks. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, it was not smooth getting on this morning.
I think if you promote them to, oh yeah, there, I see, okay.
Oh, there we go.
okay.
There we are.
There.
Perfect.
Good.
It's kind of funny starting to see all the faces just show up.
Up.
Good morning.
Yes. Hi, Michelle.
Good
Well, I started the video, but I'm not appearing, I don't think.
No, you're not.
I'll hit stop and start it again. Let's see.
Do you have one of those things that covers your camera, Bob?
No, I've uncovered that. Huh. Oh, well, I'm here.
Okay.
There you
There you
are.
are.
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
Alright.
good.
I'll share the agenda.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's bring the meeting to order. Do we have any members of the public with us today?
No.
Okay. I'm Nancy Niels Nelson. I'm the vice chair. Greg is not with us today, and so I'll be running the meeting, and we have Jill Carter with us today to talk to us about the open space bond issue. So welcome, Jill.
Yeah.
Hi,
Good.
Jill.
Wow.
We've got the agenda from last month. Oh, first of all, I guess we approved today's agenda. Does anybody have any comments or additions to today's agenda? Okay. then if I can have a motion for us to accept today's agenda.
Make a motion.
Thank you,
I'll
Bob.
second it.
Thank you, Bob. Good. Any comment? Okay, all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. It passes. We're approving the agenda for today. The minutes from last month, does anyone have any comments about those? Okay, can I have a motion to approve those?
I can motion. I'll second Jacob then.
Okay, Jacob asked for a motion to approve them and Bob Turner seconded that. Thank you both very much. Any discussion on the minutes from last month? Okay. All in favor of accepting last month's minutes, please say aye.
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 Okay, any dissent? I forgot to do that on the agenda. Okay, and we have nobody here from the public today for public comment. So we will move ahead. And Jill, you are on. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about the open bond.
Sure. So I've came to a previous meeting of this board, but that was like 6+ months ago. So it's been a while. But for those of you who I don't interact with more regularly, I am Jill Carter and I am the manager of the open space bond. So I am now leading the bond through the process of figuring out how we're going to identify which projects receive funding. And then once we start selecting projects, I will be managing those projects themselves and kind of overseeing the funding process for them. So with that, I did want to just come today to give a little bit of an update on where things stand with the bond. So let me see if I can get the right screen up. There we go. Okay. So as you guys might remember, there's 3 components of the bond. One is conservation easements, which you guys are very familiar with. You were involved in the process of finalizing that evaluation criteria for those projects, and that criteria was adopted by the commissioners back in the spring. So with conservation easements, we are now moving forward with looking at potential bond projects. I know there's a couple projects that are currently going through some of the different appraisals and evaluation processes before going into the easement purchase aspect. But the second component is greenways. For both greenways and passive recreation lands, these were very new project types for the county to be funding. And we didn't really have a process in place for looking at potential projects that falls in those categories. And a lot of my work since joining the county has been coming up with that process. And that means for both greenways and passive recreation lands, we had to have a pretty in-depth public engagement process to think about, what do we want these projects to look like? What are some of the values that we want to uphold in these projects? What was kind of the intention of the voters when they voted for the bond? And through that, we came up with a set of evaluation criteria for greenways, which I'll share what those are in a moment. And that criteria went through some refinement. It was approved by the Recreation Advisory Board. And then ultimately it was adopted by the commissioners earlier this summer. And then the last component is passive recreation lands. I know a few of you are very familiar with that process because you're on that subcommittee, but for those of you who are less familiar, passive recreation lands can kind of be thought of as a combination between conservation. Sorry, my computer screen just went black. Between conservation and outdoor recreation projects. I'm sorry, I don't know what is happening with my. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my screen went completely black and I don't know what happened. But
We can hear you, and it looked like you were starting to share again, and then it went away again. Maybe
Okay,
try it one more time.
interesting.
Also, your video froze and it just unfroze now. So maybe it'll work again when you share.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
yeah, there we go.
okay. Apologies for that. I don't know what happened, but I'm back. All right, so passive recreation lands. Again, these can really be thought of as projects that are a combination between conservation and outdoor recreation. Any activities that take place on those lands have to be compatible with protecting the natural resources. So there are things like hiking, non-motorized biking, wildlife viewing, and any kind of development processes to put in things like trails or bathrooms or picnic shelters have to be pretty low impact, and the materials used also have to be very compatible with, conservation and natural resource protection. So that project type is an extremely new project type for Buncombe County, and we spent pretty much the whole summer doing a public engagement process to try and just think of what is passive recreation, what does that mean to the community, what are the specific types of projects they'd want to see, and kind of what are their priorities around passive recreation. And based on that process, we did come up with some evaluation criteria for looking at potential projects. And those were approved by the Passive Recreation Land Subcommittee a couple weeks ago and are getting ready to go before the commissioners in October. And hopefully will be adopted in October. At the same time, we are also in the process of developing the application for passive recreation lands projects. This application window will be the first one to open between passive recreation and greenways. Greenways projects, as you may know, we have a few that are currently slated to receive bond funds towards their completion. And we're waiting until those projects are complete before we open up the application window for any new projects. But passive recreation, we don't have that waiting period. And so we are going ahead and developing the application process, developing what the questions are that we're asking and what materials that we want to see proposers submit. And once that criteria is finalized, we will add it to the application and hopefully be able to open that application window in early 2024. So just to give you guys a sense of where things have landed with the criteria for greenways and passive rec, for both pieces, we have a set of qualifying criteria and a set of weighted criteria. So projects must answer yes to the 4 greenways qualifying criteria in order to be considered, or in order to move forward with consideration. And those qualifying criteria are that the project leverages other sources of funding. The project must be able to have all funding allocated within that 7-year timeline of the bond. The project must have a feasibility study, and the project must be geographically located within Buncombe County. If a project answers yes to all 4 of those, it will then be scored against the weighted criteria. The weighted criteria, these are scored on a scale. So how well a project meets one of these criterion, it will receive a higher score for that. So if a greenway project, is very connected, it connects to a bunch of different trails or different parks or different community centers, it would receive a pretty high connectivity score. And the weights that are associated with each of these criteria was determined based on that public input we received. We had a survey, we had several meetings to really get a sense of how the community prioritized these different values. And ultimately, it shook out for greenways that connectivity was weighted the highest at 19%. And tied with that was environmental impact, also at 19%. Followed by feasibility at 18%, accessibility at 14%, countywide need, opportunity, and priority at 9%, equity at 9%, leveraging of bond funds and project costs at 8%, and safety at 4%. So once we do open that application window for greenways, all of those projects will be evaluated against these criteria. And like I said before, this criteria has already been adopted by the Board of Commissioners, so it's good to go. Now I wanted to share the passive recreation criteria as well. Again, we're still getting that through the process to be adopted by the commissioners, but it has been approved by the Passive Recreation Land Subcommittee. And while the Environmental and Energy Stewardship Subcommittee didn't have a vote, they did express support for the criteria as well. And so they also have a set of qualifying criteria for passive rec. The first two are the same as greenways in that the funds must be able to be allocated within that 7 years of the bond, and the project must be geographically located within our county. But the third item that came out of that was that we want to see projects that include a plan for long-term maintenance and management. Something we heard a lot both in our public engagement and from our subcommittee was this need to have maintenance and management on these lands, and to think about those now before we really start implementing these projects, because obviously it's not enough to just open a project. You want to keep it safe and clean and groomed, or not groomed, but keep out the invasive species, keep things maintained for the long term. So if a project meets all three of those criteria, it will be again scored on a scale against the weighted criteria. These look very familiar to the greenways, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. I will say the big thing that came out of our public engagement was a big emphasis on conservation and environmental impact. So I think there will be a lot of overlap in terms of the conservation easement space. There was a lot of interest in seeing projects get funded that are basically the county putting easements or acquiring land and setting it aside for future park use, as opposed to just putting new trails on existing parklands or things like that. I do think both types of projects will come out of this bond, but there was a lot of interest in wanting to see us protect as much land as possible while we still have undeveloped land to protect. There was also a lot of emphasis in that piece on, wildlife protection and education as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities to incorporate like conservation programming in these projects as well. And then the other thing I wanted to point out with the passive recreation criteria was that feasibility is also weighted pretty high on this piece. Both the Energy and Environmental Stewardship Subcommittee and the Passive Recreation Land Subcommittee expressed a lot of desire for projects that can be done and completed in a timely manner, and we can open them to the public and have something to show for this bond, and not wanting to drag our feet or spend too much time trying to figure out if a project idea is even possible. We want to see projects come forward that maybe have feasibility studies in place, or maybe just have land that is really amenable to these types of parks projects. So hopefully we'll see a lot of projects with big conservation environmental impact, and a lot of projects that can get done in a quick and efficient manner. So what is kind of next for the open space bond? As I said at the beginning, the conservation easements is already moving forward. We do have a couple projects that will hopefully be brought before the commissioners to receive bond funds for their easement purchase. For greenways, the criteria is adopted, but we won't be opening that application window until after the current projects are completed. That is estimated to be sometime at the end of 2025. But of course, things can change, so that's flexible. But passive recreation, we are moving forward. We are bringing that criteria I just shared to the commissioners in October, and hopefully it will be adopted. That will then allow us to wrap up that application development this fall and open that application window ideally in the January timeframe, and then move into project review and selection in spring of 2024. So with that, I'll stop and see if anyone has questions.
I don't know if I just wanted to chime in and say last time we had a question about whether a land trust could apply for the two different categories, especially as Jill mentioned, sometimes there's overlap like between say passive rec and conservation easements. And so the answer to that is that you can apply to both categories, but just know that you'll only be funded from one. So if you can apply, you can put an application for both, but you'd only be funded from either easement, conservation easements or passive rec. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, and to that end, both myself and the subcommittees that are /advisory boards that are advising this bond will kind of be the ones consulting and making that decision. So let's say a project comes forward and applies for both passive rec funds and conservation funds, but obviously we're only going to fund it from one of those. We would have those conversations and decide which bucket we felt it was a better fit for, and then that's where the funding would ultimately come from.
Could we just consult with you all ahead of time and choose which bucket instead of preparing two separate applications?
Yeah, you can definitely consult with me ahead of time for sure.
Okay,
In fact, I think that would probably be preferred is
I think for
consult
everybody.
with me. Yeah, I think we've heard from various interested parties that they wanted the option to apply to both. But if you want to chat with me and Avni or whomever first and think through which would be the better bucket, we can do that.
I think that would be our preferred modus
It
operandi.
would be my preferred as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Bob Turner related to what just brought up. So just in our trust partners, how involved have you been in, how much communication has there been between you and these programs? For instance, have you guys already started working on a strategy or a plan to how to approach the different monies, whether from LCAB or from passive rec, let's say? And so for instance, are you starting to look at projects and consider first maybe, does the landowner want the public on this land? So that's the first question you ask. And then
Right. So we thanks for that question, Bob. We have a long queue, and like you said, it's really the landowner's preference. And when we determine what type of conservation is going to help a particular landowner, that always comes down to the landowner's voluntary choice. And so there are landowners who are going to want to do easements. They're going to want to maintain the ownership and management of their land, and others who don't want that anymore. They don't want to have to deal with managing land. And so that really for us is going to define which bucket we go to for any given project. We do have a list. We're so lucky to have such a high functioning county and amazing staff people at the county. So we've been in communication with Ariel and Avni each year. We do kind of a budgeting process, and Ariel will ask us for numbers and projections and what we anticipate asking. And so as we've done that, we've already been contemplating, we might ask for transaction costs on this project from LCAB, but we might be looking for some actual purchase price dollars from the conservation easement bonds money. So we have been in communication about that and kind of thinking through where it makes sense to look for dollars for all of the projects that we are communicating with landowners about. And even on the front end, Michelle and Carl were pretty engaged with just the development of the concept of the bond, I think, in working together with the county. And was it the conservation fund, I think, that was helping?
Land, maybe?
Part,
It might have been Trust for Public Land.
Trust for Public Land, right? Sorry. So, we were showing up at the table for those conversations too. And so it's been a very, I think, I would say a mutually supportive process, and we feel really lucky to have been given the opportunity to be engaged and to now be at the point where we're able to start thinking about which projects to ask for dollars on. And I know Michelle's got a couple up her sleeve that she's going to be coming at y'all soon with. So yes, it ultimately it's not up to us what a landowner chooses to do with their land. And occasionally a landowner will be on the fence and will be looking to us for guidance. And in that case, we kind of try to just tease out with them what their goals are and what they hope for, what their vision for their land is in the future. And that usually helps them settle one way or another. We try to be very careful not to push anybody in any given direction, because we want people to feel like we're their conservation partners to achieve their conservation legacy, not like they're forced into anything or coerced in any way.
That's terrific. Terrific.
I see Bob.
Yeah. Just just to go back, excuse me, just to go back to that previous point about which bucket you'll apply for which project. I just want to clarify. I'm sure it's understood, and but just to clarify that it is possible for one entity like a land trust to be applying for one project under LCAB and another one under public lands. Correct?
But I would guess LCAB dollars still are paying specifically, if it's not coming from the bond pot, as I understand it, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Avni, those LCAB allocated dollars are still all in transaction costs, not necessarily for the purchase price of the easement.
Yeah. So for now, our plan, while we have our program annual fund transaction costs, as we've been doing until now, will be allocated from the program or annual fund. But if we have, a lot of projects, or we have a lot of good projects, and we use up all our annual program fund and we need to go to the bond, we reserve the flexibility for that. But the plan is to ask for transaction costs from our annual fund and then easement purchase from the bond.
So I think maybe to clarify, Bob, on your question, what you might actually see is a project that comes to LCAB for transaction costs and also coming before this board for a vote, but for bond dollars for purchase price of the same easement.
Yeah,
Right.
and I guess this would be a good chance, for the land trust reps, if you are planning on asking for both transaction costs and easement purchase, you can ask. I think on our end, if it would be preferable if you asked for those at the same time. We would want just that to be reflected in your application, the cover letter, the budget, and we do ask that you also have an appraisal or an appraisal that you submit with that. And we can talk more about the details, but just so that we have that document to verify, similar to what the or just so that we can verify that amount, or if you have like a restricted use appraisal or an appraisal, but we can talk more about the details on that.
Yeah, let's dig into that at some point, because we don't typically
If you don't have the
dollars
appraisal yet.
on an appraisal before we have
Want the LCAB funds maybe to pay for the appraisal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and in that case, you are able. That would be preferable if you have that number, but if you don't, then you can come back and you can do transaction costs first and then come back and ask for easement purchase.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
So it could be potentially one application submitted in duplicate the first time for LCAB funds to cover transaction costs, get that appraisal, and then sort of like resubmit the application for bond funds with the appraisal attached?
Let's have another meeting about this, because we also typically wouldn't, until we had all of our purchase price dollars committed, we wouldn't commence due diligence. You know what I mean? Like we couldn't go into it with like a 30% gap in the possible purchase price.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Um,
and yes, because it kind of depends on the land trust's process.
yeah,
Because you have private funds.
tolerance
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, so we
So-
can have another meeting to kind of understand your process and then what
And yeah, and
makes
maybe come up
sense.
with something that still makes sense, because I understand that the county's looking for clarity on verification that that's actually the dollars that are necessary for the purchase. So maybe
Yeah.
we can come up with another metric, like in CDAs, to do that thing where they'd allow a letter from an appraiser saying that this was like the ballpark of what, without actually doing an appraisal, that this is the ballpark of what this land would be worth.
Right, there's like
Or-
the letter or the restricted use. But yes, we can talk about that
That would be,
during
yeah,
another meeting and figure out like the timeline of when you would be able to do what based on what funding
that sounds
is
great.
available and approval.
Okay.
I just want to say I really appreciate Buncombe County's process and willingness to like take into consideration the land trust process rather than just saying this is how we want it done and then it not really like fit in. So thank
Yeah.
you for that
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Also, a question, I do have one conservation easement project that's ready to apply for the bond funds. Well, bond and transaction cost funds. And so I understand that the criteria for that has been adopted. And what is the process going to be for distributing the grant application itself?
For
Ready to apply.
for conservation easements or
Yes.
for passive recreation?
For conservation easements to start.
I'll let Avni take that one because it's going to be the same general process that we've been doing for conservation easements. But I'll let Avni talk about that one.
And Avi, I think I emailed you this question also. So
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, like Jill said, it's the same process. So you're saying if what you would email us or what you'd let us how you'd let us know if you're coming for easement purchase or what the grant application process for that would be?
well, like yeah, just how do you plan to share a request for proposals or like the application itself? Is it has that been shared or is it the same as the LCAB application?
Yes, it'll be the same as the LCAB application. And so when you submit the application and the cover letter and the budget, in the same way that we do with the transaction costs, we'll share that with the board before you come with a formal presentation to the board asking for the easement purchase. And so then the board has a chance to review that application before the meeting. And then when you come with the official presentation and the official ask, you can do that during the following meeting. And Jill will be here for some of those presentations as well as she tracks these projects. And then if you already asked for transaction costs and the board has been at the site, then we don't have to repeat that site visit. But if this is a new ask and if this is just easement purchase and we haven't done transaction costs, the board hasn't seen the project, we do the same thing. The board would visit the site and then we'd come back, they'd rank the project and then we'd come back and vote, just like we've done without the transaction costs.
Okay, so if I have the current LCAB application, can I use that for my first conservation easement bond application?
Yes, yeah. Any edits to cover letter, budget, or anything like that, and you can email it to me, and if you want to CC Jennifer on it as well, and then we'll kind of review that and send that to the rest of the board.
Great. Well, I will be submitting one shortly. And it's for the Lake Eden Preserve project that's already been approved for transaction costs.
Awesome. Okay.
So yeah, so I guess that'll be kind of the same application and I'll have a new cover letter to attach to it.
Yeah. And I think we did a site visit for that. I think Joel was
which everybody loved, and those who weren't able to make it might just want to go see the property again.
Yeah, if anyone else is interested.
Thank you.
Okay, Jill, anything else?
That's all for me, but as always, please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions or just want to chat. I'm always here. So thank you guys for letting me
Good.
join.
Any other questions for Jill? And I know this is going to be a moving target, and we're going to hear more from her each month, maybe even. But this is going to be new, untracked territory, and it's great. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. We want to talk about, we have no public comment. We just did Jill's talk. How about we look at our partners and see what updates we have from them. So how about Southern App go first?
Thank you, Nancy. We haven't had a new closing in the county since our last meeting, but as Michelle's alluded to, we've got a lot up our sleeves, and we also have the Full Sun Farm 2 easement will be closing probably within the next couple of months. So that is one that this board has supported in the past. So it's an exciting one to close. It's NRCS funded, so it's always a slow process to close those out. But we've got a few in the county that are getting close to closing, but none that have closed since our last meeting.
Okay, and where is that project? Where's Full Sun?
Full Sun Farm 2, if any of y'all go to local tailgate markets, you might see them out at North Asheville Tailgate Market. They also sell, I want to say it's River Arts District is their other outlet, and they also do a CSA, but they're located in Sandy Mush on Bald Creek Road, right on the Farm Heritage Trail. They donated an easement, which this board also supported transaction costs on a couple of years ago, and this is the other half of their farm for which we're purchasing a bargain purchase of a conservation easement. And they're right in the heart of it. They're next to what we call the Ducket Bottomlands, and they're actually kind of sandwiched in between Ducket Bottomlands and then a county held agricultural conservation easement with the Brown family. So it's a perfect little final puzzle piece of that little jigsaw puzzle of conglomerated agricultural conservation easements.
That's great. That's really great. Okay, any questions for Jess? Okay, Conserving Carolina, is anyone here from Conserving Carolina?
No, I didn't hear back.
You did not hear back. Okay, I'll check in with Karen and see what's going on in their neck of the woods. They haven't been here for the last couple of months. So, okay, Riverlink, Hannah.
Hey.
Hi, Hannah.
Hey. Yeah, so I don't have anything super pressing right now, but probably in the next few months, we'll be partnering with Mountain True to establish an easement on a stream restoration project that they're doing. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. Yeah, and then otherwise just had a few folks reaching out, interested in conservation easements on their land. So just gonna chat with them, but that's about it in my world right now for that.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I'm glad that it's nice to hear that the people in the community are I'm going to say paying attention and we go out and seek things, but it's nice when they come to you.
For sure.
Okay. Let's see, Michelle. Michelle, what do you have to the host? Congratulations on the opening of, is that the park, the Craig Nolan Park? Yeah.
Yeah, that is open now, so thank you.
Yeah,
Really wonderful. I love all the interpretive signs. And
yeah, the signs are great. Yeah.
yeah,
thanks.
really close to my house, so I will be on it like on the regular.
Let me know if you see any graffiti.
Oh, I will. Okay, so far none.
I hope not.
Yeah.
Well, the opening, excuse me, the opening was amazing, and talking with Karen's daughter Nikki,
Yeah,
husband Bob, they were just amazed at how many people turned out on that very hot day.
Oh yeah, I was glad to turn out. Yeah.
I took a friend, I had a visitor in town last week from Wisconsin, and I took her down that way and showed her Carrier Park, and then I showed her Karen Craig Nolan Park, and it was just so nice, and a lot of people were using it, and What a wonderful thing. So thank you, Riverlink.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear all that. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Hannah? Okay, Avni, you're next.
All right. So as Jill mentioned, we have 2 projects that were approved for transaction costs the last Board of Commissioners meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we're hoping to later bring those to the board for bond funds. And then yesterday during our Ag Advisory Board meeting, they approved 3 projects that we're planning on applying for grant funds this fall and 1 donation easement. And so we're excited about those projects to start this fall. And then I actually wanted to bring up with the board, I got an email from Kimberly DeShand. She won't be able to, she hasn't been able to make some of the meetings. She won't be able to serve on the board as she works for a nonprofit, I think, as a president. And so as her responsibilities have picked up, it's hard for her to make these meetings. And so I was just going to ask the board to think about anyone they might have in mind that could take her place. I'll have to double check, but I think hers is a 2-year term. But yes, so just if anyone has someone in mind that could take her place on this board, please let me know, and we can get that person on board.
Okay,
And that's it.
that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Bob, do you have any comments for us today from your subcommittee?
I think Jill pretty much, I mean, she was articulate. We've been rolling along. We've had good meetings. I think Matt and Bob would agree. We've been really analyzing things and trying to keep, come up with the good stuff. And I'm impressed with how fast the process is moving for that. So those would be my comments.
Okay. Bob Turner?
Yeah, I would agree with Bob and Gail. I think things are moving steadily forward. I think Jill's been doing a good job pulling everybody together and making decisions and pushing things forward. So yeah, I think it's been great to serve on it, and I think it's gonna in the long run do some good. So yeah, I'm happy to be on that board. It's terrific.
Great. Okay, do we have anything else to discuss or talk about or anything? Okay. With that, can I have a motion for the meeting to end?
Make a motion for the meeting to end.
Robert, thank you. Second, the other Bob. I saw your hand, Bob. I didn't hear your voice, but.
Yes, I'll second. I'm unmuted.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, any discussion